welcome back to another episode Up and Running. Thanks for watching. Alright, on today's episode, I'm going to talk about a few misconceptions or things that I've heard consistently throughout the years, and hopefully we can shed some light on them and get them cleared up. Alright, the first one is going to be odometers. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the way to read a classic car's odometer. There's a few different variations of them, but basically the biggest thing is that there's no 100,000 miles that you can see on the odometers. They went to 99,999.9 in some cases, and we'll get into that. But they didn't read 100,000. They just went straight back to zero. So, all right, let's talk about that. All right, so the first car that we're going to take a look at, so this odometer reads 63,194.6, and you see the first 5 characters are black, and then the last one is white. The white is the tenths. So the 6 that you see at the end of the number is white. That's how many tenths of a mile the odometer is reading. I've had some people say, well, that reads 631,946 miles. That's not right. You always got to pay attention to that last digit. If it's a different color, it's a tenths. All right, so the second one that we're going to take a look at reads 01862. And if you notice, that one's all black. Because it's all black, it's just miles. There's no tenths shown on that. If that last digit was a different color, that would be tenths. But you notice this car also has a trip odometer on it, which reads 238 and then halfway between 3 and 4 tenths. And you'll notice that that tenths digit is red. So it's a different color than the white that it shows before that. So again, in this case, the main odometer, how many miles are on the car, does not show tenths. It's just miles. And it shows 1,862 miles. So you don't know. It might have 101,000 on it. It might have 201,000 miles on it. We don't know. So the third one that we're going to look at here reads 17,909.9. And so the first digits are black with that last 9 being white. So we know that that reads 17,909.9 miles. All right, so the next one is a little bit of a variation from that, where the first digits are white and the very last one is black. So this reads 23,439.9 miles. So again, it's not 234,399. It's 23,439.9 miles. All right, so the next one shows 52,375, and it's between 8 and 9 tenths. The next one that we're going to look at reads 7,021.9 miles. So again, it's probably 107,000 miles, but it's that what you see there reads 7,021.9 miles. All right, the last one that we're going to look at reads 33,265.3. Again, with the black being the miles and the white being the tenths. So I hope that kind of clears that up for people. It's one of those things I keep hearing consistently over and over and over again. I just watched another video on YouTube where they showed the odometer, and the guy thought it showed 52,000 miles, and it was really 5,200 and whatever. I can't remember the number, but that's the way to read those. So here's a little clip of the car we call Novocaine, and it's a 64 Nova, and this car has over 400,000 miles on it. And so let me show you how this odometer reads. All right, so the odometer in this car, you can see, is a 5-digit odometer, plus it's got the tenths. And it says, looks like 31,000 747.9. It's actually just rolling over to 748. And in this case, the car's got 400,000, plus what's showing on the odometer, so it's 431,000 miles. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is batteries. I have a lot of people come to me and say, hey, my car won't start, or it's acting funny, or it's dead all the time. It won't start. If the headlights are on, it won't start. And it's got 12.5 volts in it, so I don't know why it won't start. Well, the voltage is really only a partial indicator of if that battery is good or not. What you really need to do is load test the battery, and at that point you'll know if that battery is good or not, because it'll tell you how many available cold cranking amps that battery has available. All right, something you'll notice is that I actually made a mistake in here. I called it a SL1 battery. It's actually SLI, which is starting, lighting, and ignition. There are other types of batteries, like deep cycle batteries are another one that's very common. They're used in boats a lot, but we're not going to get into that today. So we're going to focus on a SLI type battery. So anyway, what the load test does is it actually tests how well that battery can handle a load, and how many cold cranking amps are really available under a load. So I'll show you a little video that I did for testing a battery, and hopefully that'll shed some light on battery issues for you as well. Alright guys, I want to show you something when it comes to batteries. So this is a value series of the Never Start battery. This particular one is 600 cold cranking amps, 750 cranking amps. And if you look here, we're getting 12.48 volts. So off the bat you go, well, this is probably okay. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to test the battery, the SL1 type battery. The cold cranking amps is 600, and it fails at 265 cold cranking amps. So this battery is definitely no good, and it will not start this truck. It won't even turn the headlights on. So this is why it's important for you to test batteries. All right, I'm going to test this new battery so you can see what the difference is on it. So right now it's 12.67 volts. Battery, SL1 type, cold cranking amps, 630. This one is a 630 cold cranking amp battery, where the other one was a 600. Yep, and it lost connection. All right, let's try this again. 699 cold cranking amps, and it, as you can see here, the light is on green for okay. So this is a good battery, so it's gonna work. All right, let's see if this thing will start now. It should pop right off. Fires right up now. All right, we're golden. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about that I hear about all the time is oil. And what I'm referring to there is a lot of times people will take an old engine from an old car, it's maybe been sitting for the last 30, 40 years, and they take a valve cover off and they go, oh my God, did nobody ever change the oil in this car? Well, one thing that has changed for the better over the years is oil technology. If you go way back in the day, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years, the quality of oil has changed drastically for the better. So like when I was a kid, back in the 70s and 80s, and we'd open up an engine, there was always gunk everywhere in that engine. And the reason wasn't that people, didn't necessarily change their oil. Many people did change their oil on a regular basis every 3,000 miles. But the oil just wasn't as good as it is today. When I open up modern engines, that have 200,000, 250,000 miles on them, they're still extremely clean inside in most cases. But if you go back, say you pull an old Buick out of the weeds, a 60s Buick, and you take the valve cover off, and it's totally crusted and carboned up in there. It's not necessarily because the oil was never changed. It's probably more so that the oil that was used back in the day wasn't as good, and it left a lot more deposits than oils do now. So just because you see that doesn't mean that somebody didn't take care of something. It's probably that the oil just wasn't as good back then. All right, so the last topic I want to hit on today, a young buddy of mine, Jake, you've seen him in some of the other videos, I'm sure, asked me something. He's got a 79 Chevy pickup that has, I think he's like 95,000 miles on it. And he's like, hey, is that engine about wore out, or, is it worth me putting an overdrive transmission in it at this point? And here's my own opinion on that. Back in the day, the 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, vehicles didn't really get more than 100,000 miles on them. If you saw a car for sale that had 100,000 miles, you were kind of like, oh, that thing is shot. That thing is about wore out. There's a multitude of reasons for that, and I'm speaking in generalities here. This isn't a cast in stone kind of thing. But what happened back then is cars, most like American classic cars, had 3-speed automatic transmissions, or if they did have like a 4-speed manual transmission, when you were heading down the highway going 60, 70 miles an hour, that car or that engine was turning between 2,200 and 3,000 RPMs. So the engine was really screaming all the time. And so, if you count the revolutions of an engine's life over time, I mean, that number was huge very early on in its life. So they just didn't last as long as modern engines did. Another reason is, modern cars do have overdrive. They run a lot lower RPM. But the second thing is, a lot of the technology that went into the metals inside the engine is better nowadays, and they do just last a lot longer. Then if you couple that with the oil technology being way better nowadays, the engines do last much longer now. But it was pretty common back in the day, to see a car with 100,000 miles on it that was burning oil, and it smoked a lot, and things like that. I can remember seeing some cars with 120,000 miles on them, and man, they were wore out. The body of the car may have been halfway decent yet, but the engine was really worn out. So that's kind of how I answered Jake in this, is that, well, if the bulk of those miles were put on years ago when they were using the older oil technology, it's probably about worn out. But if maybe through the 90s it only had 40,000 miles on it, and since then they drove it a lot more miles, it may not be in as bad a shape as if all those miles were put on it back in the 70s and 80s. So I know that doesn't make it 100% crystal clear, but that gives you an idea of what of how the perception of miles over the years changes. I mean, right now I look at a vehicle that's got 150,000 miles on it, and I'm like, oh man, you're good to go for a long ways yet. You change the oil in this thing, you can get another 100,000 out of it. I see vehicles all the time that have 300,000 miles on them, coming in. So that's very realistic. If you keep your oil changes up and keep it maintained, that should be no problem at all. So, all right. So I hope you enjoyed the little insights that I gave today. And if you've got any other comments or anything, please leave them down in the comments. If you like the video, click the like button. But I hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to come back next time. Thanks for watching.